And we are live on air. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are in the world, you are listening to The New Way on Steemit Radio. That's with 2 E's. I'm Karen, your host, and I'm here with Dr. Lenny Thyme and Gary Stubblenuts, and our recurring guest, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. She'll be in the room in a minute here on our Discord server. She's going to discuss, the conversation can go anywhere with Bridgette because Bridgette, I call her Bridgette Extraordinaire because she literally has an extraordinary list of knowledge, skill, talent, experience, and that is my cat Kiki in the background. This is the beauty of live internet. From your home, even the animals participate. Everybody has a voice. So Bridgette, she's going to talk about what she's going to talk about, but to continue on, some of her specialties are energy healing, shamanism. Bridgette,
okay, I think I've gotten it.
And here
straight.
she is.
Sorry.
And while we're speaking about pets, because my pet just tuned in, Bridgette does have a pet as well, or more than one pet. So again, you never know when our pets are going to chime in and participate. So just letting you know. So today, I understand, Bridgette, you changed the topic for today. Can you let listeners know what do you plan to talk about?
Well, I wanted to kind of talk about dreaming, stalking, and how those kind of things kind of deal with your life. I mean, there's a lot of things that I can talk about. But I think dreaming is like a really important topic, along with kind of like stalking, which goes back to like really old types of shamanism from, like South America. We're dealing with the Yaqui and the Toltec and a lot of the people. I mean, there are a lot of people who travel down to South America to take things like ayahuasca. Right. So there's, dreaming medicines, I'm going to call like DMT, ayahuasca, peyote, and, like a whole bunch of other plant medicines out there that invoke different types of dreaming, which causes different types of activity in the brain.
Why would somebody want to do that? I mean, you're talking to a girl that grew up in Nancy Reagan Just Say No era. I mean, why? It literally scared the shit out of me in the 5th grade assembly. So.
Well, I grew up in that America too, but I had a kooky family, so I was kind of lucky there. But I am not a proponent for people taking dreaming medicine. That's not part of the shamanism type work I do, but it can actually lead people to maybe discover parts of their minds. And, I've never done well on dreaming medicines. It turns out that I'm kind of highly allergic to some kinds of medications. And even with marijuana ingesting it, I have to be really, really careful with a lot of even just, regular marijuana drugs. Because, that's what they are. They, drugs in a natural sense. But there are certain, like I can't ingest brownies or anything like that. I get like a really bad reaction and like profuse vomiting kind of scenarios like right away. And so I haven't really done well on peyote, even ceremonially. I just, basically pooped and peed my pants and barfed for 8 hours straight. And so those kinds of, and even know that they say that that's sometimes part of the healing, like having, really radical body stuff that goes on. And then the last time that I took DMT ceremonially, that was a whole other, event. And it was very important, I think, for my journey, but I was literally chronically depressed for about 5 years after.
Wow.
And I was really effed up for at least 6 months. Like literally couldn't do anything for 6 months. I mean, when I came out of it, the days that followed, I had to stay at my friend's house down in Oregon. I couldn't come home for like 3 weeks. I couldn't even barely dress myself.
Wow.
Because I had so much of everything wiped. And, then I had these really crazy crying bouts that I couldn't stop. I mean, like really like sorrowful, painful, and I do work with a lot of people who take a lot of this kind of medicines, and there was a period where a lot of this stuff was recreational, and teenagers and early 20 people were getting it and taking a lot of DMT recreationally and ayahuasca recreationally, and it really was effing them up, and they were coming back with beings attached to them that, it was pretty rough. So, I don't really mess around with those kinds of medicines, but if we're talking to like average people and we're trying to get them to understand, there's dreaming medicines that can send you out on journeys, send your mind, open your mind or whatever else, and send you out on journeys to different worlds or dimensions or whatever people want to call them. They could just be in your own self. They may not even be anywhere else outside of you.
Oh.
So, yeah, it gets really kind of complicated.
Yeah, well, good thing we're discussing it.
Yeah, and so that kind of gives us a pause. So we have dreaming medicines that can take us to a dreaming world, which is kind of like a spiritually led world. And then, while we're awake, and then we have the waking dream, and we have the night dream. My teacher, a Lakota medicine woman back from when I was like 20, she always, told me to try to do everything sober. So a lot of my teachers that have been, shamanic medicine type people have always warned me just about anything. Warned me about anything that I may use as a crutch to connect or reach over or walk over whatever else, because if I'm not sober while I'm doing it, there may be a really tough part for me getting back. And that also, if everything was practiced right, and you mean sober from the dreaming medicines, and if everything that you practiced was done right, sobriety and through practices and attuning yourself, then you won't have any limitations. Because you won't have to use other things.
Right.
To dream, travel, to
it would be organic. It would be organic, basically. You're not using any kind of substance to fuel or whatever. And so organically doing it, not saying like organic medicine, just organically as a human being, you're doing it without intent of crutches, like you said.
Yeah, and so anything can be a crutch. That could be a doorway, which can get you into trouble as well. Ouija boards, tarot cards, other types of mediums. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to classes and learn how to do different kinds of energy healing methods, but there's a point where you have used a certain thing as a crutch and you're not going to be able to get past it. You're not going to be able to get, and I don't want people to get offended, but things like Reiki and a lot of these other things where you use a lot of different kinds of symbols, and these are, they are limitations because you use them as a crutch, and so you usually develop, everything on them or around them instead of not using them at all, which in the very beginning is very difficult.
I can imagine. I actually tried to look at the difference between Reiki and shaman energy healing, and it was really hard to find anything because most Reiki practitioners out there are saying they offer Reiki shamanism. And I was like, is that even a thing? I don't know.
Well, this is the thing, is like, I'm not trying to poo-poo anything, but traditionally, if I was going to go to, say, a native ceremony, and somebody, this is actually a true story. I was working with the native organization, and we were actually changing things because it had been around for like 30 years, and there were a lot of people that had joined the organization that were not doing things the way that traditionally that you're supposed to do. And so when the new chief got elected, she really wanted to either educate people about it, because we couldn't kind of accept that kind of stuff. And so early on, we had a person that, I'm not saying that shamanism is native, right? So that's a whole other thing. That shamanism, the word shaman, comes from where my lineage comes from, which is Russia.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's actually a Russian word. And it did take, it'd be the same as medicine person or medicine man or medicine woman. Those are kind of terms that would be used kind of in the America kind of thing. And in the southern part of the globe, they would have used terms like sorcerer. So they're all the same type of work. It's just, depending on where you are at. In what Africa, there's voodoo. So they're all just kind of, it's kind of all kind of the same language, but I get really crunchy sometimes about people using the word shaman,
Mm-hmm.
and it not being properly used, because it dictates a type of training or genetics,
Not only being properly, well, yeah, because that I think for a consumer, let's say take myself for example, it's confusing.
A consumer.
A consumer. I'm consuming the energy healing services of the great extraordinaire Bridgette. And I have had shaman healing and nutrition consultation with Bridgette. So, but for me, this comes from me being a social worker. I'm very, 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 very picky about who I refer people to, like outside community resources, because the last thing I want to do when I'm trying to empower somebody is refer them to a place that's going to say, oh, we don't offer that service anymore, or that's not exactly the type of service that we do, or, oh, didn't you know, we ceased to exist, like we dissolved like 3 years ago. That's not empowering at all. So I like to vet my resources so that I can tell my clients, like, this is what I implicitly trust this person, and because I want to know that when I give that phone number or that contact information, that people, that they're in good hands for what I explain to them and expect. It can be very, especially in this day in the internet age where anybody can really put up that I do this, I do that, I do this, and it can get overwhelming for the client or the consumer that's in crisis, or
let's call instead of the client or the consumer, let's call them the participant.
The participant, I like that. Okay.
Because you have to participate, or it's not going to be helpful.
Ah, that's beautiful. Language is everything. Okay. So,
Yeah, and so
how does a participant identify, what's authentic?
Well, that's the issue. Like I've been surfing, the healing field and the spiritual, my entire life. And because I come from, family members and was raised by certain kind of people, and then along my path, I've had these really powerful, beautiful people that have, stopped a moment in their life and trained me or talked to me or helped me or taught me, on my journey. I think I'm a major skeptic. My grandmother was probably, on my mom's side, probably one of the most powerful people that I have ever seen on this planet. So I kind of gauge people that, I don't really get worked on by people out there. And I don't expose myself to trying to surf or navigate. I think that if you find somebody that you work well with, and we'll just talk like about acupuncture or chiropractic or, some of these other kind of physical modalities that can cause, dreaming or energetic type experiences, that you just have to find somebody that you actually like. I think that's the key.
Well, there are lots of people that you can like, but...
No, there's not, because you'll get a feeling about it.
Well, some people aren't as intuitive, you know what I'm saying? And
well, but you get a feeling if you like somebody or you don't like somebody. I mean, even at your job. I'm sure there's people at your job that you like or you don't like.
Oh, I do, but, I That's why I'm in the principal's office, because I think I make it very clear who I'm not, but, I just think of the vulnerable persons that I deal with, and a lot of times they don't have that kind of screen. Sometimes they do, like to the opposite degree, but at any rate, I didn't, I know that you want to talk more. I'm interested to learn more about dreaming and why it's important. I didn't want to get too off topic.
So we'll just kind of talk about this for a minute. So periodically I'll have people contact me, and I'm not trying to discredit anybody's work. I'm just trying to talk about subjects that are not talked about. Right?
Right.
So that's what I'm doing, is I'm talking about things that other people are not going to talk about, or they may not have as many experiences as me, or they may not have, a family genetic like myself, or they may not have all the teachers, that I've studied. Does that make me an expert? No. It makes me a journeyer, you know what I mean? Like I'm taking a journey, and every time, I reach an elevated place. So one of the things that I learned early on in my practice was that working with people is that if I didn't continue to do the work and continue, and I'm going to use this word, but I don't really like this word, elevate myself. But I think it's more about being conductive and having, more places that I'm plugged into, and then I'm generating, large enough amounts of power to actually, help, fill people's batteries to get them to kind of optimal health, in healing. One of the major things that I do are fills, where I fill people's fields so that they can, work on their health if they're super, super sick. Because you're going to need if you don't have any energy or power in your field, and you don't have skills on how to get that back, you're going to need somebody to fill your field periodically so you can have enough energy to change your diet. You have enough energy to get out of bed and walk. You have enough energy to just sit in the sunlight, kind of a thing.
Right.
Because otherwise you're not going to be able to actually start working to get healed. And the other thing too is like spontaneous healing comes from the right hemisphere, because that's where, you know, the omnipotent and omnipresent, you know, that's where we're at here, where all things, you know, function simultaneously. So if people don't really are believers, right, it's going to make them a lot harder to be able to cross into the right hemisphere and be able to actually spontaneously heal, which means that they're going to have like a long journey of healing. And that's kind of like what happened to me. Even though I had strong enough belief system and I believed, I've seen people heal in minutes from even like the worst possible diseases. I've seen it, I've witnessed it, but I ended up on the long journey, you know, with my brain tumor, you know, healing it and curing it. And I think a lot of it has, you know, do with the fact that I needed to go down that journey so that I could help other people on the long journey of health recovery.
That makes sense.
So, yeah, so I get a lot of people who want to, you know, refer me to people, and that they've been working with these people, and a lot of them will have these, you know, shaman terms, you know, you know, in what they do. And so I'm not trying to discount anybody, and I'm not trying to say, you know, my way is the only way, but it's just having a conversation that is not a conversation that is discussed quite a bit. But so you know, there are a lot of things going on with people. There's so many, like, let's call them multidimensional layers. There's interdimensional layers. There's other worlds. There's, you know, where the individual has lived before, and could have had lives, you know, kind of places, multiple planets. And so there's a lot going on, and there's so much different kinds of stuff that's happening. And I really, you know, I do go way out there when I'm working on people, but I also really try to bring it into like a modern language, and what those experiences are playing out in your own mind and in your own vocabulary in the now, so that I can give people tools to deal with it now in the function of their physical life, so that they can clear it out of their physical life now and thoroughly understand it, so that they want to eradicate whatever it is in their life now, and it'll eradicate it. I found that clearing people completely of certain things, or removing a lot of things out of their field, or can actually cause harm, because they are not participating, and they don't really know how that translates into the now. And what they do need is the tools in the now that help them work through all this other stuff to kind of bring them into the now. I mean, it's all about bringing all that past history and everything else with it to the now, so it can be dealt with in the now. Because sometimes, you know, you go in there and you, like, will say, for example, you know, I've seen people harvest from their planet, their home planet, and then brought here, and then been stuck in the incarnation cycle here. And they can't, there's always a lot of pieces that they can't put together, and there's also a lot of language that would have come from the places where they were at before, but we're dealing with the now.
Can we be clear on the definition of harvest from another planet? Just the definition.
Okay, so I had a client, a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful woman from the Dominican Republic, who became an attorney, a big, you know, attorney up in Toronto, and she was having kind of a lot of issues with people, and just a lot of the things that were going on, you know, hard time putting a lot of it together. And she had moved out, you know, into a very spiritual footing on a steep and rugged mountain. And we discovered that she was more of an energy field. And this is how her home planet operated, was they were energy fields. They didn't have bodies, and it's how they lived on this planet, right? So they didn't really need food or clothing or water, any of this other stuff, but they interacted with each other, and they were families, and there was even kind of like a birthing process of how these energies birthed out and then grew singularity, individual energy fields that developed. And so they came, let's just say the bad guys, people that have ruled this planet for quite a while and used us as batteries. And there was a harvesting from her planet where they captured a lot of these beings, and then they were put in electronic prisons, and they were brought here.
So
and then they were kind of
like they were kidnapped, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So that gives me a working definition. So so then when that happens, being in this environment from their other environment, it makes adjusting and understanding that much harder.
Well, it does, because, you always have these weird senses of things, and they electronically fry your circuits. So when they put you back in here, this slave world, then they don't, you don't remember things, but you may have fleeting visualizations of memories. You may have certain kinds of feelings. And she had a really hard time with her body, and it was because, originally her design was not for a body. Mm-hmm. So of course she would have serious problems with her body, because she hasn't been incarnating long enough to understand the working manual of a physical body or a biosuit.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So there are a lot of really horrible things I've seen in the last, 6 years. I get shown a lot of these, future lives. And some of these future lives are just downright horrific that, like, if I'm working with a person, I literally have to get up, take a break, pace back and forth, and kind of breathe to be able to put it into a form that I could relate it to them, to explain it so that I can start planting a seed, so they'll start working on it so this doesn't happen in the future. And then, yes, will I do everything I can to clear it? Yes, because I don't want that future. I don't think other people, if they could see it, would want that future either. So there are a lot of times where people will go to people who will remove these kinds of things for them, or get certain things out of people's energy fields. And, I do the same thing, but I really try to bring it into a physical context to give the person that I'm working with skills and tools to work on it right now. And then we have support sessions that come after, especially with the shamanism work. Because I need to see if this stuff is coming back into the field or not. Mm-hmm. And usually it takes about 3 times on average to keep looking at it, just to see what's happening, because there may be like multiple layers of it. I mean, it could stem back to your kidnapping, right, from your home world.
Okay, I have to ask you a question. This sounds really earthly, but do you take progress notes, or because you work with so many people, or the next time you see them, does everything from the previous session download to you, and you don't need to keep
well, there was a period of my life where I worked on people physically, and I never told them that I did other kind of work, and I would do that other kind of work while I worked on them. You know what I mean? I'd fix their shoulder or whatever else, and so while they're relaxing and I'm pounding on them, I'm also working on their DNA, their RNA. I'm traveling through different timelines, to figure out what's going on with them, in the shoulder, and trying to. Now, And back then, I didn't really remember a lot of the stuff that was said, because the way that I look at it is it's a stream of information, like a computer stream that I tap into, and that I only kind of bring down the pieces that I need to, whatever is bothering the person, or whatever seems to be apparent. And so I only start pulling that kind of information out and working with it. But in the last, 6 years, if I don't remember, like if it's been a really long time since I've seen the person, they actually will throw up a screen and, show me what we've done before.
Oh, okay.
So, and I mean, when the people have sessions with me, I always say that he, she, they, it, they don't exist.
Right.
It's just a stream and it's an energy field, and because of our languaging, it will use words to describe certain types of energies.
Right, but it's really us that has the limitation, because because language is a construct that we've been educated to use under, and so we have a hard time thinking beyond that. So yeah.
So there may be like a capsule of energy that appears, and it starts talking to me, and it may look like a man with a cloak, and so I'll say he, this holograph, basically of data information is appearing, masculine and whatever else, and I'll use the word he's describing to me this, but he doesn't exist. And so it's funny because people will call me back like weeks later, and they're so fixated on self-importance. This is the big issue, is that they're so fixated on, well, who is he? Is he like my special angel? Is he like my protector? And it's like, no, he doesn't exist.
Right, I mean, people probably...
I told you that at the beginning of the session, that he doesn't exist. Like, it's just streams of information and data.
Right. And I can see a lot of people would struggle with that.
Yeah, it's really hard for them because they really need to be fixated that, on the mechanisms, I guess, versus, like the information.
Right.
So, anyway, I really try hard not to leave people without tools, that I'm the almighty God, and that I'm going to fix you and take care of you, and that's all I need to do, because I found that doesn't work. But I have to learn, it would be easier for me to be able to fix you that way. But then it wouldn't stay and it wouldn't work, because it wouldn't give you anything to work on in the here and now. Right. That can bring all that to a conclusion, to the forefront, to the now, so that you can not be living in the past and your energy's not feeding the past. I mean, I've seen people have, punctures in their field that go back like thousands and thousands of years, that they're still feeding some incident. Right. And this is what is causing the cancer in their body, because their energy in their field is almost completely used up.
And can that incident be not just self, but also anybody they're like connected to ancestry? Or is it usually like a puncture?
No, usually this is like, some kind of event that had happened where there was a power struggle and you lost. Mm. And that person, event, or whatever is still feeding off that power.
Got it.
Because, the hole hasn't been plugged, the incident hasn't been brought to the forefront. And so, when people want to talk about how, beings here that you can't see or can see are feeding off of you, that's true. But nobody ever talks about really how that happens. And it happens through, and we know this in shamanism, it happens through post-traumatic stress disorder events where your field is punctured, and then you leak energy out of that hole indefinitely. And I think, in this world, they incarnate you back in and out after they've punctured your field so many times, then, your field basically is like saran wrap. It suffocates you and you die. You don't really die of disease or anything like that. You die of basically energy suffocation. You've run zero, dry.
Right.
There's nothing left to operate the biosuit.
I like that terminology.
Biosuit.
Yeah.
And this is why there are shamanic type beings or sorcerers or whatever you want to call them, mm-hmm. that have existed for 10,000 years, because they know how to generate power into their field, and they're operating the same biosuits. And they left this world, by the way. They usually occupy, close to this world, another world that they've designed, and that they go back and forth sometimes. For example, I have an Asian, because I think this is a very limited thing, but I believe that there's an extraterrestrial race more and more that is what we would be called Asian descent. I think that it isn't geographical, that why we have all these different kinds of cultures and colors and, all these other things. I think that it's extraterrestrial imprint. And whatever that extraterrestrial being originally kind of set up your culture. And so I think that you mirror that, and that's why you look kind of the way that you look. That's just kind of a belief that I've been learning, kind of, that makes more sense to me. And so I have one of the main people that works on me. He showed up about, I don't know, I'm going to say he showed up on the radar about 7 years ago. And he has, in his world, so he was a very powerful type shaman guy. I'm sure that he was into more of the mystical martial arts, which don't exist anymore. If people want to talk about those, they can get the books by Luhan Matus, who has studied in the dreaming worlds with, I think it's called Loban, which is a specific energy art that has not really existed on the planet for a long time anymore. And he was trained by masters in the dreaming world, which means that he was pulled into their world for 33 years of his life and taught this practice. And he has books, Luhan Matus, and he has several books that are very subtle but very powerful in changing, energy. And he considers himself a Nagual, which is a South American sorcerer. And so that word Nagual can be used as well. That's Carlo Castaneda considered himself a Nagual once he studied with Don Juan and, all that kind of ancestry. So that's another word. Instead of shaman, you can use the word Nagual. But
excuse me, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hi. Do you know the difference between a Nagual and just a Curandita? Do you know the difference between those?
No. Mm-mm.
Oh, I was just asking because the Nagual is a lone path. It's the lone path of shaman. It's the power shaman. They're doing it for their own power. Basically, it doesn't mean it's nefarious. It just means that, yeah. But the communal
types of shamanism is,
yes.
Right. So all types of shaman work is self. That's why, like with the native, say the native people in the Americas, that they do not really like that word shaman. And if you bring that word to them, that they will turn you away in a lot of cases. So, like we were talking about earlier, is that we have to be really careful about the types of language we use. And the word shaman actually comes from Russian descent, which is where my family line comes from. So, we have like voodoo, we have Nagwal, we have sorcerer, we have witch doctor, we have medicine people, and a lot of it just depends on your lineage of where you come from. So language is like, super, super important thing, and everybody kind of has like a different design. I have a totally different design because I have the Russian lineage, but I also have had a lot of native teachers who have taught me to incorporate it into more of a community, let's just say a community setting, where I utilize it actually to help individuals, actually moving away from actually helping people, and more actually helping the earth and the plants and all the beings that live on earth. So that's kind of like where I'm headed with that work. But I probably wouldn't have taken, the shamanism work that, I've been trained and that I've learned and that I'm genetically capable of from my family lines. I might not have ever utilized them to actually generate power for the earth and trees and plants. And so that it's taken me more into a physical plane, to where, I farm and I regenerate, soil, and I do a lot of these things physically, which I think are very important also aspects, because they teach me about alchemical processes which have time frames. They have seasons and they have directions, and they have very, I think, significant and important practices as well.
Bridgette, what I don't want to take you off your flow if you're into a flow, but when we first started the show and we were talking about dreaming, I just wondered if we could circle back to that for a minute, because when you open the show, dreaming is a very important part of the spiritual world. What if you don't dream, or you can't remember your dreams, or because a lot of people have problems with
so
that.
So that's kind of like where we want to kind of head, because I want to try to help people kind of understand that their night dream is not really their dream.
Oh, cool.
Right. Night dreaming is more of subconscious crap.
Okay. I'm beginning to because psychology, we learned neurologically what we're doing is we're going through a lot of files, and we're filing them in our filing cabinet, and we only remember intermittent files, which is why our dreams are always crazy. And I am at a point where whatever I learned about dreams in graduate school and subsequent graduate school practice, it's probably crap. So I'm starting from ground zero on this one. So like Jung and Edgar Casey and a lot of different people had similar concepts to the subconscious mind crap, and they put them like basically into 4 categories. You have kind of like telepathic dreams that you connect with other people. Say you've been worried about somebody, you dream about them, have a conversation, and then you wake up and you feel okay about them, where they're at, right? And so that's kind of what they would call a telepathic night dream. Okay.
And I'm using vocabulary that I've adopted, right? So to kind of help other people.
Cool.
Then you have health conditions, like your subconscious mind may help you with dreaming, night dreaming, too, because there's an issue with your biological suit, or your body, whatever you want to call it. There's a problem with it. There's a health condition that really needs to be kind of, addressed. And it may be complicated to actually figure out. Then there's the junk dreams, where there's just a lot of crisis and chaos in your life, and that your mind is, having crazy dreams to kind of help clear itself. And I forget what the 4th one was, the 4th category. I can't remember what the 4th category one was. But anyway, those are all subconscious mind, what I call the crap dreams, which, are important. And so before we get too far, a book that I would highly recommend for people is The Art of Dreaming by Carlo Castaneda. It's a super great book, and it talks about his journey, and he worked on moving through what he called the 4 tensions of dreaming to reach different levels. So what it means is that you have your waking dream that you're in now, right? So we're supposed to be awake, but in a lot of these traditions, you're just dreaming, right? So you're not really living, or you're not really awake. You're just in the waking dream, right? So you think you woke up, and you think that you had some coffee and breakfast and all these other things, but you're in what's, like, I don't know, holographic. I was thinking about this last night. But you think that you're doing something in your day, so you woke up, but you're just in the waking dream. And so this dream doesn't end, does it? Every day you wake up, you're having, somewhat the same dreaming experience every day of your waking life. You have the same family members. You sometimes go to the same job. You go to college or not go to college. You, whatever you're dealing with in your life, it's like when you wake up, you're stuck in the same dream. Now the key isn't to, try to energetically figure out how to get out of that dream,